Michigan music lovers. This is Scott Baker, musician, music journalist, and producer, welcoming you to the Michigan Music History Podcast, covering all the territories of the Mitten. We cast from around the block of the brand new Michigan Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Bay City, Michigan, in the heart of the Great Lakes Bay region. And I'm joined by Michigan music royalty, sitting to the left and right, Dr. J. Gary Johnson of the Michigan Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and MichiganRockandRollLegends.com website, and Sir Fred Reef, Michigan music author, publisher, manager, and musician. Together they have taught, lectured, traveled, hosted, and have been quoted worldwide on all things Michigan music. Chances are you stood next to them at the record store or shoulder to shoulder at concerts over the years. They are the record crate diggers and the library microfishermen that have dug around for the details, the credits, and the lineage that has been part of the backstory of Michigan music. So grab your favorite beverage, hit the cruise, and take a trip back with us as we open up a can of earworms on Michigan's rich music history.
You're listening to the Michigan Music History Podcast Show, channeling through all styles and eras of Michigan music, from before you were born up through this very minute. And now your host, Scott Baker.
Welcome to the Michigan Music History Podcast. This is our very first episode, and we are here today at Studio 163 in Essexville, Michigan, the podcast station for Alan Garcia's Going Deep show. And we are going to focus on Michigan music history, as in our title. And there's three of us here, and I want to introduce everybody to the podcast world. And first off, brand new Essexvillian, mid-Michigan man, but all-around Michigan man, born and raised in Saginaw, Michigan, Mr. Fred Reef. He's a musician, journalist, and author of books such as All of Me, a history of the musicians in Saginaw, Michigan, from the 1850s to the 1950s, a 100-year spread there, as well as Tell 'em 'Bout the Blues, interviews and stories tied from Detroit to Ann Arbor, Lansing to Saginaw, and all blue spots in between the state of Michigan. Fred released those books pretty much in tandem over the last 5 or 6 years, I think, when I first met you. Born and raised, as I said, in Saginaw. He's a music publisher, former manager of many blues artists. He's a current washboard percussionist, plays live still, and as I said, an author with a website, and he goes around doing interviews and talks and lots of stuff, right, Fred?
Correct.
Well, the two books that Fred put out have led him to his third book, which was what we recently came upon. It's going to be a book on polka music in Michigan.
No, the polka music is, I decided to add at the last minute a chapter, one chapter.
Okay.
And that will include polka, German, Polish, Czechoslovakian polkas.
What book is this, though?
Wait.
Oh.
And the other part of the chapter will be on, mostly from Saginaw, the Tejano music.
Okay. So it's a little bit of stuff from our area.
Right.
Okay. Mid-Michigan based.
Because I have all the other genres of music included in the book. And I was just around one night, and I picked up at a thrift shop Steve
Javitsky?
Oh,
Yeah.
Steve Javitsky. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Hard to say some of these polkas' last names, I tell you. But so I picked up his album at the thrift shop, and I got home and I was reading liner notes, and then I Googled him and noticed that his uncle had started the band, and so I thought, okay, I'll put something on Facebook to see if there's what interest there is in the Bay City Memories, or I think that's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So I put it in there, and the response I got was unbelievable. I had no idea. I thought more of Frankenmuth than Bay City, and not one single person from Frankenmuth responded.
Well, you were on Bay City Memories, so whoever from Frankenmuth would have to be logged into that to see that. However, you're talking South End, which is just as huge in Bay City as it was in Frankenmuth, as well as other parts of our state which have huge polka scenes. Which actually, I want to introduce Dr. J over here.
All right.
The man in the hot seat, the guy that I've known most of my entire life. One of my inspirations as a journalist and as a music lover. Mr. Dr. J. Gary Johnson. He's a longtime teacher, professor, rock and roll history instructor. He happens to be the founder of Michigan Rock and Roll Legends website and also the Michigan Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Born and raised in Bay City, Michigan, Gary's been all around the state. As a matter of fact, recently he's been outside of the state collecting all of the Petoskey rocks for our state that have to do and partake in all the things rock and roll history of Michigan. So, and Gary doesn't just know rock and roll. He's like Fred and myself. We kind of cover a lot of territory in our music loving. But I think the basis for all three of us comes down to rock and roll, the blues, stuff like that. R&B, Motown. Yep. And Gary, you're quite popular right now. You got a lot of stories coming out of you. What's going on over there?
Well, the big thing, Scott, is we're moving the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame into the Historical Museum of Bay County, which is real exciting for me. The Hall of Fame thing really just kind of started out as a lark when I was teaching at Kramer Junior High School and putting together a rock and roll history class as an elective. Did a lot of research, and one of the things that really surprised me, and this was back in the 1990s, early 90s, was that Michigan did not have a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Right. I mean, I was shocked. You'd think with Motown alone that somebody would have put something like that together. So anyways, would have been maybe a couple years later, the city of Bay City hired a company to try to think about ways to develop the waterfront, the uptown in Bay City. And I'm sure it was probably more of a publicity stunt rather than anything else, but they asked for input from the citizens of Bay City for ideas that how the waterfront might be used. And my suggestion was a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, thinking that, Bay City is centrally located. It's not Detroit, but, there's some pretty interesting rock and roll stories. Number one being Madonna's birthplace, the site of 96 Tears, probably the greatest garage rock song ever written.
The biggest pop tune.
Well, number one song. I mean, it's the only number one hits ever going to come out of Bay City, I believe. But also a couple other interesting things, like Grand Funk Railroad. The three original members actually came together in Bay City out on Tuscola Road. The former was a building that was the a former site of a company that represented, was Delta Promotions, a company that represented a number of bands, including the Pack, which had Mark Farner and Don Brewer in it, and also a reformed version of Question Mark and the Mysterians that had only Question Mark, but Mel Shocker was playing bass.
Mel was in it for brief.
Anyways, they heard Shocker playing bass in rehearsal and kind of kicked around the ideas. That's how Grand Funk Railroad formed, right there. Also, Meatloaf recorded his first single in Bay City at the Art Scheel recording studio.
Was he in Frigid Pink or what? Popcorn Blizzard.
Popcorn
Blizzard, that's
with Pete Woodman
Yeah.
and Rick Bozzo. I think that's the way you pronounce his name.
Pete's wife, Susie.
Yeah, right. And recorded his first 45 there. You know, just amazing. And Fred, I don't know, when you were researching polkas, did anybody bring up Gene Guizdala, who recorded albums at Shields Place?
I have a lot of photos of him. That his whatever his last name is, Guizdala. someone with the same last name sent me a lot of photos.
Yeah.
So he's one of the 4 or 5 that I'm going to add in that chapter.
Yeah, he was pretty big in Bay City with his band. And, of course, I think he was a commissioner for years. And it's too bad he's still not alive. He would be a fascinating guy to talk to, since he actually recorded with Shiel.
Hey, I noticed on some of these polka albums, Swivel is the producer.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. He's got a studio there in the South End.
Oh,
Yeah, right in the back part of his house. So he's got one of the first home studios I ever saw.
okay.
And I looked at his CD output, and he produced Bigfoot Bob and the Toe Tappers and some other bands that I'd seen from around the state. And then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, I'm all these polka ones." He started flipping polka things. I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's all right."
Yeah. Well, anyways, I got off track here a little bit.
No,
but
that's fine.
anyways, I wrote this proposal up, submitted it, and of course they weren't interested in doing a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Bay City. So I thought, maybe this is just something I could put online for fun. Didn't know anything about websites. So after I retired, I went out to Bay Arnac and talked to one of the instructors out there and just asked him, are there any students out here that might be interested in working with me on this and putting together some kind of a website. So that's how it started.
What year was that, or around when?
This would have been about 2004.
It's a great website.
Oh my
Well,
Lord.
it's grown quite a bit, and I had to hire some professional people after a while in order to do it. Because we were incorporating a voting system and all kinds of stuff that was beyond what the kids at Bay Arnac could do. But they, it was really fun working with them, and they did a great job. So anyways, it started from there, and it started as kind of a fun thing, and it's grown to the point that it's been, mentioned in, I think now 5 or 6 books. And, I'll get people from all over the world that will write in, and actually even got hacked by the same Russian team that was involved in the 2016 election.
Holy crow!
Yeah, and
That's a popular website there, Gary.
well, and I was able to track it down just using Google Analytics. Wow! That it all came from St. Petersburg in Russia.
No kidding.
Just using Google Analytics. With nothing sophisticated. So, anyways,
It's all good.
The site has been a lot of fun. We have over 100 inductees, and I try to make it as democratic as possible. So, of course, you have the usual galaxy of great Michigan artists that everybody knows, but there's also a number of garage bands from all over the state, including the UP. And so
Yes.
It's been a lot of fun kind of getting to know some of these people and interviewing them and telling their tale and so on. But the big thing for the Historical Museum of Bay County was acquiring the original Frankie Lyman tombstone.
Which is what you're getting this current press blitz from
Yeah.
New York to New Jersey,
Yeah,
to the coast, to all the way back home to your homeland here.
It's a legendary bit of rock and roll memorabilia in New Jersey, and it just, I can't. It was just a series of coincidences that led me to this thing, and so the big challenge is going to be, now that it's in Bay City, to find a really good way to present it in a museum setting that you can tell this kind of remarkable story about the tombstone. So
Now, Frankie Lyman, he is there a tie to Michigan with him?
well, he was the first teenage rock and roll star.
Period.
There was nobody before him. I mean, really, recorded music for the most part prior to the mid 1950s was really directed at adults. And it wasn't until the rock and roll movement that the record industry recognized this vast audience of young people, and the whole was just like a major industry shift. And Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers were part of that, along, of course, with Elvis Presley and all the other early rock and rollers. But Frankie Lyman was very influential, even though their career as a group only lasted about 18 months.
Right.
And but very influential to Motown, as was doo-wop.
That was my question. Was does he ties into Motown a bit with the influence?
Diana
influence,
Ross.
period.
Diana Ross just cites him as the reason she
There you
started
go.
singing.
Yeah, there you go.
And I think one reason that Berry Gordy Jr. Selected Diana Ross as the lead singer of the Supremes, because it's questionable if she was the best singer. Florence Ballard
Oh man, yeah,
really had a
that.
pretty good
You
voice,
could have a whole episode on that.
but Diana Ross had the quality, that adolescent sound, that Frankie Lyman sound, the same thing that Phil Spector recognized in Ronnie Bennett, in the Ronettes, that Frankie Lyman sound. And, the early Supremes records, before Baby Love and Where Did Our Love Go, where they kind of changed and got into the Supremes sound as we know, we're very much indebted to Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers.
Right there it is. That's reason enough to bring it home. That's
Yeah.
cool. What a cool thing happening. I mean,
Yeah,
and
it's pretty neat.
the whole story behind it is very easy to track down if you search Gary Johnson in any of the news on the web or in any current newspaper. There's a lot of stories.
Yeah, I'm kind of working on a series. I've got the first 2 sections done that kind of deals with Frankie Lyman's career, first with the Teenagers, and then things really went south when the management broke up the group and had him go as a solo artist, then the drug addiction, and finally his death at the age of 25 from a heroin overdose.
Oh, he was that old. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, not old, but
yeah. But,
He didn't make the 27s like most of them.
no.
But at the same time, another crazy follow-up to this whole story is the tracking down of the publishing rights for the songs and all that stuff you were telling me, which I also saw in a lot of the press that I saw early come out on it. Like, all the band members never got a piece of the pie, and all the wives.
Well, then, there was this big court case, which actually that story was turned into a Hollywood movie that came out in the 90s called Why Do Fools Fall in Love. Halle Berry
right?
appeared in that one as Zola Taylor, one of, she was the female member of the Platters, who was a love interest of Frankie Lyman. That's kind of an interesting story in its own right. But so, anyways, I'm on the 3rd section right now and trying to kind of dig into the doo-wop revival, how that kind of happened after Frankie Lyman's death, and doo-wop had kind of been pushed out of the let's say the top 40 world by the British Invasion and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Right.
You just didn't hear any doo-wop after 1964. Frankie Lyman died in 1968, but then a few very strange things happened that got doo-wop back in the news. That's what I'm kind of trying to piece together right now, step by step, kind of how that happened.
Interesting. So it's like Fred with his books. Gary, you're on the search for the Hall of Fame pieces and how the history comes together. And myself, I'm a journalist that has been around mid-Michigan trying to piece things together musically as a musician and as a writer since the 90s. And ironically enough, I think the cool story of having the 2 guys I've been talking to here for this podcast is we all live within about 2 miles, 3 miles of each other in a little triangle here in mid-Michigan. Fred recently moved here. And when I was talking to Fred about the polka thing, I'm like, where are you at now? And he's like, I'm right down Knight Road. I said, I'm right down Knight Road. And I says, Gary lives in Essexville, right? And he's like, oh yeah. I says, we need to do a podcast.
Yeah.
This is putting it together. So I'm just totally thrilled to have both you guys on this musical journey to put this stuff together.
Well, it's our pleasure, Scott, and thank you
Definitely.
for being the guy that's really starting to put this together. So that's very cool.
yeah.
Well, I want to tell some of the listeners, we spitballed some ideas back and forth. Fred and I did early on, before Gary was on vacation at the time out east and trying to take care of that tombstone. And we're going to try to cover all aspects of Michigan music. I have some stuff written in here that I wanted to definitely, and not just the music scene and the musicians, but the record stores. Like Fred used to own record stores all over the state. He used to run record stores down in Ann Arbor. Gary and I have been music collectors, bootlegs. I mean, Fred was on that scene. Fred was part of that scene. Everything we dig into, we've kind of dug into each other throughout the years. And when it came to a real deep question on where does this needle in the haystack belong, we've always seemed to have gotten hold of each other. So this is a really nice opportunity to get it all out here.
Well, Fred had a pretty cool record store in Bay City back in the 70s called the Black Kettle.
Oh, yeah.
It was right across from the State Theater.
State Theater, yeah.
Yeah.
Davidson building.
And I can remember some of the albums I bought there.
Really?
I bought my very first Bruce Springsteen album, Born to Run, at Black Kettle. I remember I bought my first Toots and the Maytals album, Pressure Drop, at the Black Kettle.
Right on.
And many others as well. Yeah, it was a fun place to go to. And you had a studio downstairs.
In the basement, yeah.
I was never down into your studio, but did you record George Herder's
Ballad of the Third Street Bridge
Third Street Bridge song? Yes,
Ballad of the Last Saga Saloon.
The Last Chance.
The Last Chance.
The Last Chance Saloon. I remember The Last Chance very well.
I just did a show with George just a little over a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
I got invited to a Grateful Dead night in Detroit, and George was on the bill, and he's like, "I've heard of you." I'm like, "I've heard of you," and we gave each other a hug, and we went and did a bunch of Grateful Dead, and we've been in touch ever since. So
yeah, good. George, George and his band played at Lynn and I's wedding.
Really?
Yep.
Nice.
He was in a band called the Draytons. Unfortunately, Charlie Walmsley was in that band.
Charlie sent me a bunch of photos recently of that band.
Wow. Okay, I'd be real interested in taking a look at those.
Sure.
I gave Charlie a snapshot several years ago when he had his office downtown in Bay City that was taken at that wedding. And in fact, our wedding song, Lynn and I, we have a wedding song. And they, of course, they played it at our wedding, so was the Draytons. So
wow.
That's great.
That's fantastic. Small world.
Yeah. See, what I'm trying to do in my new book is like these early musicians, the early rock and roll bands, they progressed to different bands like Ron Cunningham.
Yeah.
Who owns Prime Brothers, who I just bought a coach from, and I was hoping to see him, but I guess he's retired.
Yeah, he's not in there all that often.
But the guy there said he would love to talk to you, so I look forward to it.
Yeah, I interviewed Ron for one of the stories they did on Band Canyon.
Oh, okay.
Because the Del Reys.
I remember them.
Well, they won
that old.
They won the very first battle of the bands at Rollaire, and they were hired to play. They played quite a few times at Band Canyon. When Band Canyon first opened up, they played at Daniel's Den.
Yeah, that's where I seen them.
Yeah, and Ron said they backed Sonny and Cher.
I heard that too.
At one of their performances at the Den, and I think that was '65. I Got You, Babe, had just come out, and they were, red hot.
I could tell you exactly when that was because that's the year I graduated from high school. The end of that summer, I got in a car accident, and I had tickets to see Sonny and Cher, but I was in the hospital, and I think they were there on a Saturday or a Monday or something, a weird night, and I thought someone would have told them, and they never came up to my room, though. Well, you're a teenager. I thought,
Sure.
they were number one.
Well,
or on their way to be number
yeah,
one.
well, I think that was a number one hit. Gosh, it was all over the radio. Yeah, I interviewed Fred when I did a story on the Byrds, because the very first time the Byrds played in Michigan, believe it or not, was at Band Canyon in Bay City.
Now, while we're talking about Band Canyon, Daniel's Den, and some of these other things, this is another topic that we do want to have a whole evening of. We could have 2 or 3 shows of, is all these great festivals and event venues and places that, and the ones that particularly that Gary and Fred have mentioned have come out of the mid-Michigan area. And these were all over the state. These were so very important in sparking the 60s and 70s onslaught of festivals and gatherings, and some of the very first places artists that became tremendous throughout the 70s and 80s began playing, they were somewhere around a little town here in Michigan at some point, and these guys got backstories on all that.
At teen dances.
Yeah, and I think really that was, in my mind, the most important aspect of the teen dance clubs was that it gave an opportunity for young people that wanted to be in a band. That was a place for them to play. Now you look at the situation today, how difficult it is.
Yeah.
If you were in a band, where do you play? And, and the music scene has changed too, because back in those days, it wasn't so much the, writing your own material as it was how well could you cover the hits of the day.
Right.
And that, everybody was kind of listening to top 40 radio. And so it was real easy, I think, much easier back then to get kids together around music than it is today, just because of the nature of the way music is listened to.
Absolutely. I think the cover thing has made the full circle at this point. More and more people are doing the cover thing right now. And it's the most popular artists, they might have a lot of great records out, but they're just the big videos that they're getting their hits on are who they're covering or what they've done.
Yeah.
And I think it's come pretty well full circle. That's really a big deal right now at this time for musicians that are out playing and trying to put out their own material anyway,
Yeah. Well, it's always fun to hear somebody's take on a song. But I always enjoy it, not so much as you do a carbon copy of it, but
make it your own.
Can you make it your own? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And just maybe a little different way of arranging it or presenting it. That's always fun to listen to. I always enjoy that.
Now, I assume both of you you guys were already talking about Daniel's Den and Sonny and Cher. You both made your rounds to all these little spaces all around the state?
Well, actually, my big spot was Rollaire.
Where was that?
That was on State Park Drive.
Yeah.
And that was the big summer place to go to.
That was in Bay City on State Park Drive?
It's right across from Muscle Beach Drive-In. Now it's just an open field.
Yeah.
But at back in those days, there was a roller skating rink on the west side of the structure and a putty golf course on the right side. Wow. So that was a big place to go to, if you, were lucky enough to have a date or something like that, going to play putty golf was kind of a popular thing to do. But boy, on Tuesday nights, that Rollaire thing was, there was, usually there could be upwards to 2,000 kids in that roller rink. And it was tight. There wasn't that much dancing going on as it was just kind of like walking around.
Oh.
And socializing and seeing all these people you knew.
Everybody's kind of doing their own little party.
Well, with the music in the background. And then, they had these battles with the band. And then everybody would kind of stop to a certain extent and watch the bands because you got to vote on them. Who was the winner that night. And it was really fun. So when a lot of the teen clubs opened, I was out of high school and in college and, starting to work in the summertime. And so I kind of missed out on, going to Band Canyon and Daniel's Den and the Blue Light in Midland.
Wasn't there also one on River Road?
Band Canyon.
That was Band Canyon?
But before that, there was the Sound Lounge.
Oh, yeah.
That was open. Now, I hit the Sound Lounge. that was when I was in high school. And I'm trying to think I think it was Don Andrews
Don Andrews.
was the DJ there. Now that was Strictly Records.
The owner's son sent me a photo of it's in my first book, when it was still,
Place
it was a nightclub.
Yeah, right.
And I can't think of the name right now. But then it turned into the Sound Lounge, and I was just a little too young.
Yeah. See, that's where, we kind of missed it, where I was kind of looked at, wrongly so. I'll admit I was wrong on this. That was looking at the teen clubs as kind of being more of a high school thing, where now I wished I would have went, saw the Birds there. And
Yeah, well, you didn't know. You were living it. You were living it as it happened. And when you look, it's like hindsight. You're like, hey,
2020.
Rush's very first show in Michigan, I think, was at Bay City at that little thing out there, where you Muscle Beach. It's like, for real? It's crazy, and some of the bands that have come through here. But yeah, you don't think of it while you're living it, and that's cool to always be able to go back and read about it, whether it be Fred's books or see it at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or at the Michigan Music Legends. This is wonderful. This is great. What are some of the places you like to go after, Fred? Being out of Saginaw, I mean, you had the store in Bay City, which I think came a little after all that, right? So where were some of the places you like to hit?
Back then?
Yeah. What were, the Roll Air and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah, well, the Roll Air. Then Daniel's Den, mostly. Band Canyon. I saw the Birds. I saw Amboy Dukes there. A lot of bands there. But mostly in Saginaw at Daniel's Den. And on Saturday nights, I'd go to the YMCA dances, which Bob Dyer and Dick Fabian from WKNX put on.
Yeah, called the Wyagogo.
Right, the Wyagogo. On Wednesday nights in Saginaw, there was the Elks dance. So almost Tuesday night, Wednesday night, there must have been something Thursday. Friday and Saturday, there was something to do for teenagers.
Yeah.
Did I also hear that there was a venue in Caseville that people went to a lot?
Probably.
Or somewhere up in the Thumb? So I remember talking to Gary Aisler or somebody about that.
Well, I saw a list of all the teen clubs in Michigan.
And then they held a lot of big bands that would come through here.
Yeah.
That are now big.
There was a DJ by the name of Ted LaFave that Ted was a member of OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute. That's where I met him. And Ted ran a lot of dances out in the Thumb area, Caseville, Seabuene, whatever. And, usually they would be just renting a hall or, a VFW or something like that and, putting him there.
Did he own the Ace of Clubs?
I don't know, Fred, if he did or not.
Because I just did an interview with somebody, one of the early rock and roll guys, and he was saying, well, then we started to play at Ted LaFave's or something like that, Ace of Clubs.
Well, that was a big music place.
Oh, I used to, when I was of age, I used to, I was there all the time.
We went to Ace of Clubs, too.
The Horseshoe on Saginaw.
Well, Luther Allison played the Ace of Clubs.
I booked him there.
Really?
For 5 nights, 5 or 6 nights.
Wow. There you go.
Okay. I interviewed him. I still have the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there almost every night. And one of the last nights, because there was hardly anybody there, well, he was in the middle of a song halfway through the set on the Saturday night or something, and then he looks over to his band, and the drummer goes, hits his drums, and Luther Allison goes, "F you off." He goes his hand up the neck of the guitar and starts playing, and then he went, starts playing the blues. And I brought a couple of my guitar buddies, and they flipped out. And then Luther Allison came out with a long cord and came out right to our table and played for my 2 friends. And
jeez.
Yeah, he was quite a showman. He did something like that, for us too, came right at our table, sat next to my wife, then. And
I must have seen you there.
Yeah. Oh, it was cool. Well, you put on some good shows in Bay City, too, at that little
Oh, that coffee shop?
Yeah,
Ed
it was
Mueller?
I think it's where American Kitchen is now, isn't it? The same
I think
building?
so. Yeah, I had Dr. Ross there, and I had
Boogie Woogie Red?
Boogie Woogie Red.
Yeah.
Ed said I had Ed Mueller, who owned it. We're Facebook friends now. But he said I also had Eddie Burns there. Okay. I don't remember.
I
but
don't remember that one. But Dr. Ross, one of my favorites, man. Dr. Ross,
Yep.
the harmonica boss.
Oh, fantastic.
I first saw him at the Ann Arbor Blues Festival,
Yeah.
you know, with the one-man band up there. Oh, he was so good.
Well, maybe I was thinking, not just Gary, but my friend Mick, he used to play a lot of shows up there. Mick Brown, he said something about going up the thumb because they all couldn't believe that MC5 did a show up there because no one, they barely could believe they came to Bay City or did a show in Bay City, but he says all of a sudden, boom, they're up there the next day and they weren't announced or anything. And they played this festival thing
Yeah.
that everybody, he says, oh, we used to go there. He's from the thumb. And I'm like, what? Another place? It's like, where were these great venues all at? You know, it's interesting to hear now because, like I said, and you lived it. You weren't at the time thinking anything big about it, but looking back as you saw the seeds of all of rock and roll history being formed right here.
Yeah, you know, another good place was the old Saginaw Auditorium.
Oh, boy.
Well, that was really a nice venue for music. You know, it wasn't real big, but,
Well, I remember
you know,
it.
that's where all the black acts that
Right.
came to Saginaw, they didn't play, you know, Daniel's Den or the Wyatt Go-Go. They played the Saginaw Auditorium. They had Ike and Tina Turner and
Well,
the
that's first-
Motown artists. I saw B.B. King there.
Wow.
We were probably at the same
Hey,
show.
I had a
Yeah.
tuxedo on that night. I was in a wedding that day.
You were probably the only white guy that was dressed up because
Right.
what struck me was, you know, all the young people
Oh.
kind of looking like hippies.
Right.
And over on the other side of the audience were the black people, everybody dressed to the nines.
Oh.
I mean, fur coats and ties and just looking as sharp as can be. Yeah, what a dichotomy. But it was great. And B.B. King, what a wonderful place
Bobby
to see
Bland.
him. Oh, Bobby Bland, yes.
It was
Wow.
great.
Another favorite of mine.
Now, would those acts also go through Flint on their tour? Wasn't there one in Flint on that during that era?
Well,
Or
the IMA
the circuit, I should say. What was the circuit?
That's where I saw Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, it was
The
a pretty
IMA.
big venue.
That's what I was thinking. IMA. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the Alan Freed show used to come through Michigan, and that's where they played at the IMA. I have a poster.
Well,
digital
You know, a friend of mine, Tom Cedarberg. Tom passed away
Sure.
sadly a few years ago.
he did.
Yeah. Well,
He was
you
ju-
remember Teddy Bear Records, I'm sure.
Well, he was just at my apartment not too long ago, 4 or 5 years ago
yeah,
now, because
yeah,
I
'cause I'm
sold
trying to think, it's
all
probably
my
been-
records to one of his buddies.
yeah, it's probably been about maybe 3 years since he passed away.
He was the guy that used to own Teddy Bear in Bay City.
Right.
Oh,
But
okay.
when Tom was a kid, his father was Al Cedarberg, who was you know, a congressman for
Lived across the street from my grandma and grandpa.
on
in Bay City.
Garfield.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, small world.
Yeah.
But Tom had an 8mm camera, and he
I saw that.
yeah, he got his mom. He would have been, I think it was in 8th grade at McGregor School. And he got his mom to take him to the Alan Freed show. And they were lucky enough to have a seat right in the front row of the mezzanine. So he had a place to rest his camera. And, you know, of course, there's no sound. But he shot 2 reels, which is, you know, the reels were only, you know, maybe about 4 or 5 minutes or something like that. And he got everybody on the show for a short segment
Wow.
in color. And turns out to be the only color footage ever taken in the United States of Buddy Holly and the Crickets.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Because the original Crickets breakup, this was in the spring of 1958. The Crickets split with Buddy Holly shortly after that tour was over. And, of course, 1959, just, the anniversary just was
Yesterday.
Yeah.
the day the music died.
That's been on the radio every day.
Yeah,
this week.
but Tom shot that footage and just kind of forgot about it.
Where was this at the IMA?
At the IMA.
Oh, we darn.
So it's actually one of the rare pieces of footage of an Alan Freed show. I mean, these are the days where,
Wow.
Nobody had, cameras or anything like that, So, anyways, again, through a bunch of weird circumstances, it comes to the attention of one of the representatives of the Buddy Holly Memorial Society, who was running all those memorial dances at, I'm trying to think what was the name of the,
I know.
anyways, the place where he performed and then got on the plane and the plane crashed shortly thereafter. So anyways, they came, they came to their attention. Tom actually showed the guy the film on the wall of Teddy Bear Records, set up an 8mm camera. Well, the guy just absolutely flipped out. And
Wow.
it came to, the Crickets were not happy with the Buddy Holly story, the one with Gary Busey, just because, the way that they didn't get the facts straight, typical Hollywood movie.
It's a great movie, though.
Well, it was entertaining,
Entertaining.
Yeah, entertaining.
It was sort of like the, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? It wasn't very factually accurate, but it was an entertaining movie. So anyways, Paul McCartney, who owned the rights to the Buddy Holly song catalog, he and the surviving members of the Crickets want to make a documentary movie that sets it straight. And it ended up being called The Real Buddy Holly Story. And they commissioned Tom's footage, paid him $2,000.
Wow.
He shipped the reels to London, and they had to have the rights for 1 year. And the footage is used in the documentary.
Really?
But, they don't give Tom name credit.
Oh,
all it said was
not good.
From a fan in Michigan. That's shown on the screen.
That's lousy.
And then they don't put his name in the end credits. Wow.
No, don't do that, people.
No,
I always give
terrible.
credit where that comes from.
Yeah.
Now, that show that he shot, was that with Big Bopper and all that, or is that a completely different show?
This was different.
Okay.
This was one of Alan Freed's typical productions, which had like 15 or 16 acts. But it was like an all-star show. There's Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Diamonds, the Chantels. I think Frankie Lyman was on the show. Larry Williams, who was kind of like the successor to Little Richard when Little Richard became a minister. Trying to think of who else was on there. But it was just like all these acts that had hits on the charts in 1958.
Okay. Now, what year or about when did that McCartney put together Crickets thing come out, and where can we find it?
Yeah.
Well, I think I've got a copy, of course. And,
DVD?
Yeah. I'd be
So you
happy
can
to
purchase it on DVD.
That's how I got it. I'm sure you can find it.
So Amazon, it's already out there.
Yeah, I would think so.
And it's called The Real Buddy Holly Story.
Yep. And it's well done.
I
there's
think
something
Paul
to look for.
McCartney, doesn't he own the bass?
He might, and he appears. McCartney appears in it.
Okay.
He does a little short segment on there, but it interviews the surviving Crickets. Sonny Curtis, who kind of was actually in the original Crickets, then ended up after Buddy Holly's death, kind of taking Buddy Holly's role as the singer in the Crickets, and Joe B. Malden and. All the other guys, the other two guys in the Cricket. I got a chance to meet him in Green Bay and talked about it a little bit and told him, hey, I know that guy, that Tom Cedarford. He's my friend.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, you got a lot of archival footage, sir, Fred, don't you?
Well, I have a lot of tapes,
Yeah, I was
a
at.
lot of tapes.
That was one of the things when I was thinking podcasts was coming across your reel-to-reels and your mass collection of history, Michigan music history you carry around with you from move to move, and now you're in Essexville with it all. Tell us a little bit what you got there, Fred.
Well, starting in, I guess it started in 1970 when I rediscovered Lieutenant Slim, who was living in Pontiac, Michigan. And I interviewed him. And so a lot of these tapes of the blues artists that I interviewed are on reel to reel. So for many years, I couldn't listen to them because I didn't have a reel to reel player again. So once, a new system comes in, I'll transfer it I'll have someone from reel to reel to a cassette, and now a CD, and then a DVD, or
Now digital, yeah.
and now digital. And so I have, mostly these are all interviews. And then sometimes, like with Dr. Ross, that interview I did with him in 1971, we did on his front porch. And then he said, well, let's go inside and jam a little. And so I said, okay,
Did you bring the washboard with you?
of course. It's always with me. And
I love it.
so we went inside, and so I have about 5 songs of he and I jamming and him talking how he liked it, and someday I'd like to release that. I got to get it cleaned up. And then I have another one, a music one on Arthur Gunter, who wrote the song "Baby Let's Play House" that Elvis re-recorded or covered. And I have a tape of him, of both he and his brother, who had never recorded before, and Arthur and myself on washboard,
Fantastic.
which came out pretty good, I'd say. And so all these are just sitting in a box in my closet. That, when you're doing these things, like you said earlier, when you're doing these things and living them, you don't think of anything historical
Right.
about, in the future. So I was just doing this and having a good time, meeting all these, going down to Detroit and meeting all these blues guys and going to Flint and meeting Dr. Ross and, going into places that I normally wouldn't go. And, I wasn't that scared, especially like where Lieutenant Slim lived in Pontiac on Paddock Street. It was kind of pretty dangerous down there, but
A little shady down there.
yeah, matter of fact, one of the second time I interviewed Lightning, we did that on his front porch, and it was screened in, and some young guy came up and pulled out a gun, a pistol,
Lord.
and Lightning just saw it right away, and he just went right over and he says, "Come on, get out of here, go on." He said, "What you doing here? I don't want no trouble." And, he got him out, and we were just petrified,
Oh, my Lord, yeah.
3 young white guys from Saginaw, and here's a guy with a gun in the ghetto of Pontiac. So Lightning said, "Well, you guys should probably go right now." And we said, "Yep." So we get out in the car, knock on the window. It's the guy with the gun.
Really?
He said, hey, I'm cool, man. I'm cool. I need a ride." So he kind of just jumped in the car, and we gave him a ride a couple blocks, and he got out, but we got out of there quick.
What a story.
Yeah. Probably thinking you were going to get robbed.
Oh, yeah.
Be carjacked.
Wow.
But, And now it's a story, but at the time, it was just a thing happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was fun. It's looking back at it all now. It's fun looking back at it.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. We gotta document this somehow for everybody.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff coming in. Myself, I also have a huge collection of interviews from all over the years, phone interviews mainly for national artists that have come through, whether it be Pine Knob or DTE, I guess, or Palace, and all the Saginaw Bay City shows that were done. I did some interviews for all different spots around the state, and what I originally did was I put them on micro cassette because that's all I had back then for phone interviews on a phone before that we all had the cell phones, and then I started recording my cell phone interviews eventually, and my phone interviews to mini disc. So I have bags of mini disc interviews, and this can be anybody from, I believe I did a Phil Lesh interview at one time from the Grateful Dead. I think I did a BB King interview. I've done so many of them. I can't. People ask me, did you meet this guy or talk to him? I have a great one though that is always at the top of my memory, and I got to dig it out someday. It's one of R.L. Burnside's last interviews. They came up here and did a show in Detroit, and I did it. The Times used to give me carte blanche to pick shows out and do stories on them back before M Life came along and pulled the trigger on all of us stringer writers. And he's like, you come backstage, you bring me a fifth, or a pint, something of Jack Daniels or something. And he come with a couple other guys. I can't think of their names offhand, blues guys, on the tour. But not even a year later, he was gone after playing that Magic Stick show. And I'm like, man, I just so lucky to get in on some of this stuff while they were here because they're falling by the wayside. As I get older, this stuff becomes more historical to my memory.
I think he was, one of his last records was produced by a Detroit guy, Tino Gross.
Really?
Yeah, Tino did it for Old Rooster Records, I think it is, or Rooster Records.
So he got off of Fat Possum then? And he got on
Fat Possum.
Okay, no, Fat Possum's the label he was on forever.
Right, that label.
Yep.
And I don't know how they got Tino to produce it out of Detroit, but...
Well, he's probably had some kind of connection that...
He may have been a fan, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, Scott, did the Bay City Times give you a little expense account so you could buy that Jack Daniels for...
No, but you know what? I made sure I came in with it, snuck it in my camera bag at the show when I got frisked, and I got all my credentials, and it was at the bottom of the camera bag because I was shooting pictures that night. Paul Wine something or other was the opener, blues guy, and then it was T Model Ford.
Oh,
I remember it now. T Model was a hoot. He wanted to keep hitting me with his cane backstage. He's like, "What are you doing back here?" I was, and I was the white guy in the back room with all the blues guys and their handlers and their crew, and I'm like, I'm just here to say hi to RL and hey T Model and Paul, and we all were shaking hands, and I got down to talk to RL. He's like, "Hey, what's up, guy?" I'm like, "Hey, you bring me my stuff?" Sure did. He's like, passed it around. T Model's hitting me with his cane. You better be having one for all of us over here. I'll never forget. It was like being in the golden round of the greats there.
Well, you had a pretty good entry device there with that bottle.
But I got some cool pictures. Instant friendship. It made it work. But yeah, I think all of us have a pretty good archive of some cool stuff that we can utilize or at least talk about on the show.
Definitely.
And just a heads up, in episode number 2, we're going to feature Dr. J on the Michigan Rock and Roll Hall of Fame move as it scoots down Washington Avenue in Bay City, as well as past, present, and future ideals for the Hall of Fame itself. And Sir Fred's going to discuss in depth the details behind his new Michigan music book and the paths he has taken as an author. And in future episodes, we're going to tackle things such as deep Michigan roots rock and Michigan jazz and blues, indigenous music to the state, venues, music stores, bootlegs material, hot bands from the day to current bands that are really doing well now, and lots of stuff between different authors and modern day success stories and the musicians that have gone on to do bigger and better things in all the genres, and collections and collectors, And your input's going to be very important too. Please let us know what you'd like us to talk about, or what you have dug about the show, or what you find interesting, or if you want to find a detail that you wondered about down the line. Please get in touch with us, and let's get this all part of the Michigan Music History Podcast. Thank everybody for their interest in this podcast. We're going to try to develop a website. We're going to try to develop a YouTube page and have live video footage. We're going to try to take this to wherever our listeners may be interested in taking it, because the three of us can just sit here and BS all day long and have these kind of great stories that you hear already on this first podcast and bring back all the memories. So if you're interested at all in contacting us, get a hold of us at mmhp989@gmail.com. That is our official email address. And until we can contact you otherwise, throw us your memories and your updates and your hero worships and your own little things that you think we might be hip to do future podcasts on, because we have a slew of cool Michigan music history to talk about, and we're going to keep this rolling. So one more time at the email, that's mmhp989@gmail.com. And Gary, Fred, and myself will be back here at Studio 163 in Essexville, Michigan, for another podcast coming up soon. And I want to make sure that you guys also contact Gary and his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame website, MichiganRockandRollLegends.com. And you can email Gary Johnson, Dr. J, over there. I'm sure you can find an email for him if you have anything you want to add to that, as well as browse his website of Michigan Music History. Fred's books are available, as well as a contact for Fred at fredreif.com. That's FREDREIF.com. And I am Scott Baker at scottbakermusic.com, where you'll find my music, my band page. You can search the internet for any of my journalism writing over the years. That's still maybe available. At the same time, we're going to have our own internet page, hopefully down the road here, if this works out, as well as more details and more ways of getting these music history pieces of Michigan to you. This is almost a scholarly thing, so I'm really proud. And I want to thank Dr. J. Gary Johnson and the legendary Fred Reif for being here with me. I'm just thankful to be a journalist friend of both of theirs, and that we all live right around the block from each other.
Well, thanks again, Scott. It was my pleasure. It was great.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
We will be in contact, and we will talk to you all in the podcast world soon.
Thank you for tuning in. Additionally, Dr. J can be reached at MichiganRockandRollLegends.com. Sir Fred can be hit up at FredReif.com. And you can get a hold of Scott through ScottBakerMusic.com. You can also search Michigan Music History Podcasts on Facebook and YouTube. You've been listening to the MMHP in the 989.